Hi, everybody. We have Catharine Arnston on today. She's the founder, CEO, Chief Scientific Officer of Energy Bits and is an expert in algae for wellness, nutrition, beauty, biohacking, and longevity. Today, we talked about algae and why we don't know about it, and the different types of algae and what they do, who needs algae and why it's essential for the immune system, beauty, and fitness, and why algae is one of the most sustainable foods out there. So I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. So why don't you tell us what algae is and why we don't know about it?
Yeah, well, first, algae was the first life on Earth almost 3 or 4 billion years ago. And so that alone puts it in a unique spot because you can't get any more ancestral or any lower on the food chain than algae. And algae is everywhere. It's and I'll describe it in a second so that you can understand there's a difference between macro and microalgae. But the reason we don't know about it is because it's not grown here. 99.9% of it is grown in Asia, where they've been using it daily for over 60 years. I'm going to show you a picture. This is an algae farm. So first of all, people think algae is a supplement, and I tell them, no, it's a vegetable crop. It's not quite it's not like a real vegetable because it doesn't have some of the anti-nutrients like lectins and oxalates, but it is grown in fresh water. Ours is grown in fresh water, and then we air dry it without heat, so all the enzymes are intact. But it's definitely not a supplement. Supplements are made in labs from extracts. So, when you're growing up, you become familiar with whatever's around you. And I live in Boston, where there's Dunkin' Donuts, and we see Dunkin' Donuts trucks driving by all the time. And I'm actually Canadian. I used to live in Vancouver, and we'd see trucks driving by with logs. Or if you live in the Midwest, you see them driving by with wheat on their way to the mill. So those are just part of your vernacular. But there's no algae anywhere here. But in Japan or any Asian country, it's quite normal to drive by an algae farm. It's quite normal to see an algae truck driving by on its way to get dried. And just like other indigenous foods, like matcha or kiwa, or even collagen, which had been used for centuries in other countries. Algae has been used for centuries, except it's never been grown here or explained to anyone here. And the biotech companies weren't interested because it's a vegetable, so there's no patents that you can get on algae. It's just like you can't get a patent on broccoli. So the reason why, so I explain to people, algae isn't new. It's just new to you. I'm here to help you understand what it is and why you definitely need it in these days that we live in, full of toxins and missing nutrients. So given that as a backdrop, let me explain what algae is. As I already mentioned, it's a first life on Earth. There's two main types of algae. One is called macroalgae and the other one is microalgae. We're going to be talking about microalgae mostly today, but let me tell you what macroalgae is because it does belong to the same family. It's that big stringy stuff that washes up on shore, also known as seaweed. So it comes from the sea and it has lots of fiber and iodine, but virtually no nutrients, but it's still good for you because of the fiber and the iodine. But that's macroalgae. Microalgae is called microalgae because it's microscopic in size. Something like 1 million cells of microalgae could fit on the head of a pin. It's that tiny. And microalgae, unlike macro, is everywhere. Macroalgae is only in the ocean. Microalgae is everywhere. It's in the lakes, the rivers, the ocean, of course. It feeds the whales. It's in your soil. It's in your swimming pool. And there are tens of thousands of strains of microalgae. Macroalgae, there's just green, mostly in red kelp, but there's tens of thousands of strains of microalgae. The main ones that people know about are blue-green, green, and red. Now, the two we're going to talk about today are there's an example of blue-green, which is spirulina. I'm going to show you that's what spirulina, we sell them in tiny tablets. And then chlorella is a green algae. Spirulina is called a blue-green algae because it has two pigments in it, a blue one called phycocyanin and the chlorophyll, and chlorella has just the green pigment. But I mention that because there's tens of thousands of blue-green algae. And so if you hear about a blue-green algae bloom closing your beach and it's, because of the toxicity, we're not talking about spirulina. It's just a type of blue-green algae that's in the ocean. And I feel badly for algae because it gets a bum rap. Algae only shows up when there's already toxins around, bacteria. Algae is the cleanup crew. Algae kills bacteria. In fact, it's used in virtually every water treatment plant in the world, certainly in America, for that reason. So don't get angry at algae when it closes your beach. Get angry at the people, who dumped the toxins into the ocean that caused the algae to be attracted to that area. So when I talk about spirulina, we are not talking about algae that comes from the ocean. The ocean is toxic, and there are these toxic algae blooms that do show up. Spirulina, as I mentioned earlier, is grown in fresh water. Everybody grows it in fresh water, whether you buy it from Target or Whole Foods or from us. It's a freshwater crop, so you have to get that through your head. Same with chlorella, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, spirulina has been endorsed since the 70s by international institutions as the most nutrient-dense food in the world. The United Nations had a global conference on it in 1974, declaring it the answer to world hunger because it has the highest concentration of protein in the world. It has 3 times the amount of protein as steak, and it's the most sustainable crop in the world. It's been endorsed by NASA for having 1,000 times more nutrition than any other fruits or vegetables. They say 1 gram of algae has the same nutrition as 1,000 grams of fruits and vegetables. And I have an interesting chart or calculation I'll show you. So that's because it's so tiny and you get so much nutrition per cell. And then when you consolidate it into these little tablets, you start to understand why it's got 40 vitamins and minerals, highest concentration of protein, highest concentration of chlorophyll, highest concentration of something called superoxide dismutase, which is a very important antioxidant that hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about later on that most people don't even know about. So spirulina, with all that high protein, all the proteins already in amino acid form. If anybody knows anything about nutrition, they know that your body cannot absorb protein in its current state. It has to be broken down into amino acids. Well, spirulina and chlorella are already in amino acid form. So there's no work for your body to do to get access to those aminos. It's a complete protein. It has all 9 aminos that your body cannot make, which a lot of things like collagen is not a complete protein. And it has 18 of the 20 of the aminos. So in fact, I'm the one that discovered that the nutrient profile, especially the aminos in spirulina, is virtually identical to the profile of mother's breast milk. That explains to me why in Japan, when babies cannot digest mother's breast milk and could die, the only thing that does keep them alive is spirulina and water. And it's because of this reason. And we know that mother's breast milk is the perfect food. So spirulina is probably number 2 because it's so similar. So we call our spirulina energy bits because it gives you energy, and you get the energy from all that rich amino acids, protein that's in amino acids that your body doesn't have to break down. And here's the cool thing. Spirulina is a bacteria. It's called a cyanobacteria. It does not have a cellulose wall. So once again, there's nothing for your body to break down to get access to all the aminos. So it gets absorbed almost instantly. And because spirulina has all the B vitamins, including B12, that convert the aminos into energy. So that's one of the main reasons why it gives you energy. Rapid absorption. I call it efficient nutrition because it's already in amino acid, the protein is, no cell wall to break down, and the bees convert it into energy. It also happens to have the highest, a very high amount of iron, in fact, the highest amount of concentration of iron. It's a vasodilator, which opens up your blood vessels so all the nutrients and oxygen can get to your brain, into your muscles in your body. It's loaded with essential fatty acids, some omega-3, but also one called GLA, which is technically a omega-6, but because it's not heated, it behaves like an omega-3. It has boron, which helps with your synapse curves, synapses. It's both just the most nutrient-dense, complete nutrition. You could live on this forever. I mean, we're not recommending you do, but you could, because the profile is so remarkable. So most people use the spirulina, which again we call energy bits, for getting up in the morning, starting your day. The reason I got into this was because, and I can tell you more detail later on, my sister had breast cancer. She's fine now, but her oncologist recommended she change her diet to an alkaline diet. I helped her figure out what that was, which led me to plant-based nutrition, which I ultimately went to school, and then I started teaching plant-based nutrition and found out people know what they should eat, but know they should eat more vegetables, but it was too much work. And researching what would be easier for them to get the nutrition that they need without lugging home vegetables and cooking them and cleaning them and fighting with their kids. That's what got me to Algae. And so I love the tablets, because each one of these tablets has the same nutrition as an entire plate of vegetables, but you didn't have to clean, cook, or eat them. So it's effortless nutrition. No more arguments with your kids, your husbands. They're safe enough for newborns, pets, grandparents. So take them in the morning, because that's usually when you're hungry and you want some energy. You could take 2, 5, 10, 20, 30, whatever many you want. Take them in the afternoon when you have a slump. Take them before a workout. They're ketogenic. There's 0 carbs. There's 1 calorie per tablet. So for 10 calories, you can be full for a couple of hours. Like seriously, in getting all your nutrition at the same time, it just doesn't get any better. So I'm just very, very excited about spirulina. And there's a few other nutrients I do want to talk to you about later on, but I want to be sure we cover chlorella. So yeah, by the way, we because I started the company because of my sister, and after the first couple of years, I found women weren't buying the spirulina, they were buying the chlorella. My girlfriend said, well, you got to give it a cute name and make it pink. So because spirulina has more collagen than collagen powder and highest concentration of antioxidants, so the protein / collagen builds your skin, the antioxidants remove free radicals. So there is a second brand on our website of spirulina, but it's absolutely identical. I'm not trying to trick anybody, but someone said, oh, you got a girl spirulina and a boy spirulina. So that's pretty much, I guess, the way to describe it. So, but it is remarkable if you're doing, intermittent fasting. I'll show you my fancy backdrop.
So I was going to ask you, if you're doing intermittent fasting and you take this, is that breaking your fast?
No, absolutely not. And we've done tests at keto shows. I speak at keto shows. And the literature shows the same thing. It does not decrease your ketones or increase your glucose, because there are 0 carbs, and there's literally no digestion because it gets absorbed so quickly, because it's a bacteria, and there's no work for the body to do to get access to the nutrients that are in there. So it's very, very again, efficient nutrition.
Is there anybody who should not take this?
For spirulina, no. And that's what's so beautiful about it. There's no contraindications for anything. It's the easiest thing to digest because it gets absorbed so quickly. Like I said, newborns, it's safe enough for newborns, pets, children, teenagers. It's very cleansing because it has a lot of chlorophyll. When we talk about chlorella, there is one situation where I would suggest it's not, how to take it, because chlorella is a chelator, it's a detoxing agent, but spirulina is just a very high nutrient dense, cleansing, nourishing food, but and it is food. So but let me also just point out that even though and we'll talk about chlorella in a second, because it's food and it's sort of people, I did say it's a plant, but technically it's not a plant, certainly not spirulina, it's definitely a bacteria. But I was on Dr. Gundry's podcast last year because he's a big fan of algae, and ours in particular, because algae offers all the nutrients of plants, but none of the anti-nutrients. It has no lectins or oxalates in it. And for people who aren't familiar with that, these are proteins that are in plants. Some are very high, like the nightshades are notorious for very high lectins and oxalates. Almonds are very high. And these proteins are very sharp, and they puncture, if you're sensitive to them, they can puncture your stomach lining and can lead to autoimmune disease. So, and I'm sensitive to them, so I have to be very careful. Now, the reason why they're in the plants is because plants evolved on land, and they needed to find ways to protect themselves. So they developed these these proteins that taste terrible and are toxic to the animals and the bugs too, to protect themselves. And it worked. But algae doesn't have them because algae is not a land plant. Algae comes from the water. So it's never had to develop lectins or oxalates as a means of protection.
That's
so
amazing.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So it's and that's why one of the reasons why carnivores, one of the many reasons carnivores feel so great when they switch over, because they're not getting any of these lectins or oxalates.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan of vegetables, but I would suffer, and I would, have indigestion and just sort of plow through it because I thought, I'm plant-based. I gotta do this. But when I started cutting them out, I started feeling, because I read all of Dr. Gundry's books, and I started feeling so much better. I hardly buy any vegetables anymore. And I like to point out, and we'll talk about this when we get to chlorella, that our soils are so damaged. Here's the problem. First of all, people just aren't getting the nutrients that they need to be healthy. And even if you are eating plants and vegetables, you may be susceptible to these lectins and oxalates and not even know it. And number two, they just don't have the nutrients that they had 50 years ago because our soils are so damaged. There's no minerals left in them. So and very often they're grown far away. So they're harvested before all the nutrients reach the fruit or the leaves. And by the time they get to your plate, they've lost 90% of the nutrition that started out in such a diminished fashion anyways. If you've noticed, your arugula goes yellow after about 3 days now. So there's a lot of spoilage. And with algae, it never goes bad, number one. It has 500 times more chlorophyll than arugula, at least chlorella does. And it has no anti-nutrients. I mean, and you don't have to carry it home, cook it, or clean it. It's like the miracle food, literally. And it's a gift to us from Mother Nature. And we grow ours in triple filtered spring mountain water, as I mentioned. And we're very unique because I think we're the only company that I'm aware of that does not use high heat to dry their algae. And that's because when I started the company, it was just to be of service to people, to give people some nutrition that they needed. That was clearly, if you're deficit of nutrition and you're eating an acidic diet, the pH of your cells can change, which reduces the oxygen in the cell, which attracts bacteria, which attracts disease. I mean, and that's what leads to things like cancer and heart disease. And we'll talk about some of that as well later on. But because algae is just so pure and concentrated, and all of our enzymes are intact because we don't use high heat. It's crazy what this stuff does. I could not live without it. I've been taking it for 12 years now.
Wow.
And I'll share with you, I'm turning 66 this year.
Wow.
So I'm no spring chicken. And
you look great.
And no Botox either. This is all natural. So my skin is healthy, my digestion, I did do some other work like remove the lectins. I cannot eat sugar, and a bunch of other things, but algae is a mainstay for me, and it travels well. Whether you're going to work or you're commuting or going to the gym, we have these single pouches that you can pop in your gym bag, your handbag as well. So anyways, spirulina's pretty remarkable.
Can you talk a little bit about why algae is essential for the immune system, especially with COVID, and everything like that going on right now in the world?
Well, part of that's related to the chlorella, which we haven't talked about yet. Can I just dig into chlorella a little bit?
Yeah,
absolutely. That circles back because we talked about spirulina.
Yeah.
So chlorella developed about 1 billion years after spirulina, and it does belong to the plant kingdom because it does have a cellulose wall. And in fact, it has the hardest cell wall in the plant kingdom. So 2 things about chlorella, and this relates to the immune system. Now, remember how I said spirulina has the highest concentration of protein in the world? Well, chlorella has the highest chlorophyll in the world. And chlorophyll is an immune builder. And there's a couple of ways it does that. I'm going to show you a picture. This is the molecular composition of your hemoglobin, and this is the molecular composition of chlorophyll. Notice that they're virtually identical. That's because they are. The only difference is your hemoglobin has iron in the middle, and that's what carries oxygen, and chlorophyll has the magnesium in the middle. Now, because of that, chlorophyll builds your blood. And when you have healthy blood, you're going to have a healthy immune system. You're going to have healthier digestion. You're going to have a healthier cell. It's also alkaline. And Otto Warburg, who's a German scientist from the 40s, discovered that cancer can only exist in an acidic cell. And your cells need to be slightly alkaline, which is 7.1. And when you have a depressed immune system, which is not functioning well, a couple things happen. Number one, your nutrients can't get into the cell and the toxins can't get out. And chlorophyll, not only does it build your blood, it heals your cell walls, because you need your cell walls to be permeable. And I'm the one that I'm not saying I discovered this, but I discovered that chlorophyll is a fat-based pigment. And here's how I discovered that. Here's some spirulina I put in a dish with water, and see the beautiful blue color that disperses. That's the phycocyanin, okay? And then down here is the chlorella, which is but you see how it's just green, number one, and it clumps. It didn't disperse like its brother over here, spirulina. I did this 20 times, and finally I had an epiphany, and I went online and checked some science, and it is indeed, chlorophyll is a fat-based pigment. Phycocyanin is a water-based pigment. So phycocyanin has lots of healing properties, like we'll talk about in a second, stops the virus from getting into your cells, and it also stops the growth of blood vessels to tumors. But chlorophyll, because it's a fat-based pigment, heals your cell walls. So the way I describe it to people is, when your windows are dirty, you can't see out and sunlight can't get in, and that's not very good. So when your cells aren't permeable, nutrients can't get in and toxins can't get out, and that's definitely not good, and that depresses your immune system. So I tell people, think of chlorophyll as window washers for your cell walls. It helps everything move efficiently. That's why sometimes when people do juicing with plants, it's many cases it's the chlorophyll that's helping that process to cleanse the cell wall so that everything functions properly. So number one, chlorophyll, and which is in both spirulina and chlorella, but chlorella has, as I said, 500 times more than arugula, 25 times even more chlorophyll. So it's the highest concentration of chlorophyll in the world, which is why it's called chlorella. So that's number one. Number two, chlorella, that hard cell wall, attaches to toxins. A lot of times our bodies, our health issues are because of toxins, whether they're from the outside or from the inside, whether it's air pollution, pesticides on your food, cosmetics, they get into your body, and our bodies are just bombarded with toxins these days. And our immune systems we're not developed to support that kind of toxic load. And they barely test any of these pesticides or chemicals anymore. And even when they do test them, they test them in isolation. We don't live in isolation. So you get all these toxins and chemicals layering on top of one another until they start damaging the cells, which damage the cell communication, which causes rogue cells, which leads to all sorts of disease, whether it's, heart disease or cancer. So getting the toxins out is critical for your immune health. And chlorella is the most natural way to do that. And I recommend it way over anything like activated charcoal, which pulls out all minerals. Chlorella only pulls out lead, mercury, radiation, pesticides. It also identifies alcohol as a toxin. It identifies lactic acid as a toxin. So it only pulls out the bad stuff and leaves the good stuff. In fact, it's loaded with all your electrolytes, magnesium, potassium, sodium, everything that you need. So that's number two. High chlorophyll pulls out toxins. It's also loaded with all the nutrients that your immune system needs to function. The trouble is, and I was just like everybody else, I didn't know what my immune system was. And so I kind of created my own description and I called it, there's two categories. One I call it your visible immune system, and the other is the invisible. The visible is easy. It's your skin, your mouth, your nose, because that's where viruses enter, particularly through something called the ACE2 receptor cell, which is, and your nose, your mouth, your lungs, and your stomach lining, that's where most of your ACE2 receptor cells are. So think of your skin and your mouth as sort of like your security system. So if somebody breaks into your house, your security system goes off. It's an alarm, right? So that's the first thing that happens is when a virus enters, it alerts your immune system. The most important part, though, is the part that you can't see. And these are the cells that your body makes in your gut to identify. Once the invader has been, they've been alerted there's an invader, then it identifies the invader, finds it, attacks it, hopefully kills it, and pulls it out. And that's effectively your police after your home security system has alerted them. So your police are in your gut. And they're things like white blood cells, T cells, killer cells, macrophages. These are all terms that people aren't familiar with. And the problem is they can't see them. So it's hard to understand what they are and how they function, but they do operate. But to operate, they need nutrients. Just like if you have a dinner party, you got to go grocery shopping first, right? No dinner, no food, no dinner party. If you don't have the nutrients that your immune system needs to create those macrophages, T cells, B cells, killer cells, then you're kind of out of luck. And your immune system is there to help you. So it's begging you for the nutrients. And chlorella has virtually there's about 12 zinc, B12, aminos. There's a list and we can send it to you that are chlorophyll clearly that your immune system need to create these T cells, B cells, killer cells. So it can identify the invaders for anything, whether it's a cold or, the virus or anything. So that's one of the other reasons why I love the chlorella for that reason. Now, the other interesting thing is, and I don't want to dwell too much on COVID because I think, had 2 years of COVID, we're kind of COVIDed out. Right?
COVID over, right?
We're COVID over, yeah. But here's the other interesting thing about COVID. And again, I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm sort of done on it as well. COVID attacks not just your lungs, but your blood. And what they found is that it inserts itself into your hemoglobin and kicks out the iron atom and inserts itself instead. This is why people were dying and still dying, primarily from a heart attack. Because if there is no oxygen in your blood, then none of your organs can function. Nothing functions. And your heart is probably the largest user of oxygen. And so it's the first organ to die. And it gets even worse than that. So when it kicks out the iron atom doesn't disappear. It just becomes a rogue atom in your blood cell. And if anyone's ever been to a harbor, you see how iron gets rusted, how it rusts things. So here you've got this rogue iron cell bouncing around in your blood cells. Normally it's inside your hemoglobin, which I describe it sort of like having bubble wrap. Your iron atom's safely protected inside your hemoglobin, sort of like having bubble wrap, so it can't cause any damage, sort of like a drunk at a bar. But when it gets out into your bloodstream, it causes damage. So the speed at which it causes your lungs and your heart to fail is worsened by this rogue iron cell that's just causing so much. It's basically a free radical, so it's causing so much damage. So when you have algae, which is, and the other thing I forgot to mention is that all disease, including the virus, is acidic. So because algae, now what I'm going to tell you is not proven by science yet. So this is just my theory. I'd like to prove it out one day, but because algae is the most alkaline food in the world, and because it has the highest iron in the world, my conjecture is that it can restore the iron atom into the blood to reoxygenate it. And because it is so alkaline, it might be able to restore the correct pH of your blood, which should be 7.34, and hopefully maybe help correct the situation of having the virus in there. Now that is conjecture, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to, point that out. But aside from that, chlorella, rich in chlorophyll, hard cell wall. It also has the highest RNA and DNA in the world. Now the rest, I'm back on the science proven stuff. Highest RNA and DNA in the world. So as you get older, that gets damaged. So this helps restore that. It has something called vitamin K2 in it, your daily requirement of K2. A lot of people probably again aren't familiar with K2, it's related to K1, but quite different. K1 is what makes anything that's green, and which is good for you sometimes. What K2 does is it moves excess calcium from soft tissue into your bones. And you say, well, what's so important about that? Well, let me tell you, they're realizing that a lot of heart disease is calcification of your blood vessels, arterial sclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. I tell people, what do you think is hardening? Calcium. They're realizing our Alzheimer's is partly a result of too much calcium in your brain. Kidney stones, guess what's hardening? Calcium. Your skin. I think that's why my skin's so great. Too much calcium attacks your elastin, which is the structure that keeps your skin up and firm. And when it collapses, it causes wrinkles. So to have too much calcium is very damaging to your health. And yet virtually everybody in North America is K2 deficient. And here's why. We didn't have a problem until the early 70s. Why? Because animals can convert K1. They have a bacteria in their gut that can convert K1 to K2. So up until the 70s, when we were eating animal protein, we were getting the K2 because it was in the meat. But then in the 70s, the farmers decided that they would make more money if they moved all the animals off the pastures and into enclosures and fed them corn. Nothing green about corn. They would make more money, which is what they did. But instantly, overnight, the supply of K2 in our food supply disappeared. And they're finding that's exactly when heart disease started going through the roof. Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
So algae, especially chlorella, is one of the few foods, it's only grass-fed animal protein, a Japanese dish called natto, or algae. And chlorella has twice as much as spirulina. So I'm more bullish on chlorella for the K2. And K2 is a very complicated nutrient. There's all these M4, M5, N6 types. And the one called M4 is the only one that can permeate the brain, because you can buy K2 supplements, but they're made from fermented chickpeas. And for whatever reason, that does not get into the brain. So I tell people, if you're going to take K2, get the one that's going to go everywhere. Don't cheat yourself. So chlorella and animal protein are grass-fed animal protein are the two that offer that. So chlorella also has the highest tryptophan in the world. People think it's turkey. No, chlorella's got 5 times more than turkey. And tryptophan is a precursor to melatonin, which helps you sleep, and serotonin, which is your happy neurotransmitter. So overall, chlorella is a wellness algae. So it helps you recover from anything. So we call ours recovery bits. Notice it's in a green package because it's a green algae, and spirulina is a blue-green algae. So it's in a blue package.
Is that why, Catherine, is that why your energy bits don't have the chlorella? Because it acts like, it can make you relaxed or tired?
I'm sorry.
Because you were saying that the chlorella acts like melatonin, like it can be like melatonin. So, and then the energy bits I noticed don't have chlorella, they're spirulina.
Yeah, there's 2 different algae, spirulina and chlorella.
I understand that. That's what I'm saying.
Spirulina doesn't have chlorella in it because it's a different algae.
Right.
Chlorella is one algae and spirulina is another algae. So I'm still, well,
my point is the reason that your energy bits do not have the chlorella in it. And
you keep saying, I think you're confused. There is no chlorella in spirulina. They're 2 different algae.
That's not.
Okay, I guess I don't understand the question.
You just wanting to know the differences between these, in the
Yeah,
we have a brand. Yes, we have a brand called Vitality Bits, which is a blend of the 2 algae. Maybe that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Spirulina, we encourage people to take them separately because they do completely different things in your body. So if you're looking for satisfying your hunger, if you're doing intermittent fasting, if you're doing workouts, if you want energy and focus, that would be spirulina. And so most people take that in the morning, in the afternoon, or before a workout. If you're looking for wellness and detox, that would be chlorella. And you can take either one of them any time of day, but we definitely encourage you to take the chlorella before you go to bed, because your body goes through a repair and detox cycle when you're sleeping. So if you have chlorella in your body, it's like having a cleanup crew while you're getting your beauty rest. It also, helps with peristalsis, which is bowel movements. So if you're looking for wellness, that, and detox, it would be the nighttime. But if you can't buy them separately, you just want something that's simple, that's why we created the one that's the blend of the two algae.
Okay.
So it's just really more of a for simplicity, maybe for travel, you don't really care, because both of them, the spirulina can replace a lot of other supplements. It can replace a multivitamin, fish oil, CoQ10, sports fuels, snacks, because it can be a meal replacement too, because it's so nourishing and satisfying. And the chlorella, because it has so much chlorophyll, it can replace vegetables, greens. So it's, a lot of people, if you get it blended, then you're getting both both worlds, and it just simplifies everything. Because everybody I know has like anywhere from 10 to 20 bottles of supplements on their, and they all run out at different times. And sometimes you can't take some with the other, and it's just so confusing. And so this just really simplifies for people. And it's also, it's food. So it's, and it's raw food. It's not there's no heat that's been used on ours. Other companies do. So I can't say that they have raw food.
And how much, so you're suggesting 3 or 4 tablets at a time, but you can take a full packet.
Oh yeah. It's just like any food, some people are satisfied with one egg, and some people, if they're, going to go do a workout or something, they need 4. So it's really what works for you. A lot of people are so undernourished that 2 will make a difference. If you're anemic, you'll notice it immediately because of all the iron. But I mean, for the first 3 or 4 years, we got noticed by the athletes. So marathoners, triathletes, cyclists, Olympic athletes. And we were working with them for so long. It wasn't until we got to 30 as the number for them that they noticed a difference. But they're really, fine-tuned. Their bodies are, fine-tuned pieces of equipment. And we fuel NHL teams. They put 75 spirulina in their smoothie before a game to give them all that energy on the ice. And they put 75 of the chlorella recovery bits in their smoothie after the game to pull out the lactic acid. And I only mention that because it's truly up to you and what works best for you. They're great for kids. We say give them 1 tablet or half a tablet for their age. So if they're 4, maybe give them 2 a day or 1 a day, even if you want. If they're 12, give them 3 or 4. Because there's no interaction. So I do want to circle back to chlorella on that one. There's no interactions at all with spirulina, and it's so nourishing. There is high protein, so we do suggest that you drink more water to help with the processing of the protein. The only thing I would mention about the chlorella for contraindications is because it does pull out toxins, and because there are metals in some medications, and there are certainly metals in vaccines. If you want to make sure they don't interact with the medication, we just say take it 2 hours before or 2 hours after your medication. On the other hand, if you do want to get rid of any metals that were in any vaccinations that you got, then you definitely want to take them right away. Only chlorella will pull out the metals. Spirulina is cleansing, but will not remove the metals. But it could be a godsend for people who, they're unbelievable for autistic any children on the spectrum, because lots of times that's what has happened. It's great for ADHD, spirulina more for the ADHD, because it helps with the focus, and it balances blood sugar because of the high protein. So, and the energy that you get, I mean, we call them energy bits because they do give you energy, but it's not like a sugar rush, because there is no sugar. It's very steady. You might not even notice it The best way you describe it, like we describe it, is you just feel fresh. That's pretty much it. Like you had a good night's sleep. Nothing dramatic, no race up, no race down. If you are taking them as a workout fuel, you will notice that you either ran further or lifted more, and you weren't even aware of it at the time, or you had better speed. It's a very subtle energy, because it's just nutrition based. It's not stimulant based.
What about if patients or if people are dealing with iron overload or hemochromatosis? Like, are these safe?
Yeah, yes, but again, I'm not a medical professional,
Right.
so
Okay.
we always defer to speaking with your
Mhm.
practitioner. But because both of them are adaptogens, and because they are plant-based, if your body doesn't need that nutrient, it will not absorb it. It's not like taking an iron supplement, which I urge people never to take, because they're very toxic, because your body, it doesn't exist like that in nature. And so you can build up a toxicity, and it can be very damaging. So, but because this is what's called organic as opposed to inorganic, which means it's live, it does not cause that problem. But I always defer to the professionals to make that decision.
Right.
Catherine, where can people find your products and any other information?
Yeah. Well, our website is energybits.com, ENERGY, B for boy, ITS. And we have a 20% discount code for your listeners. No surprise, the discount code is Health Babes. So that gives you 20% off everything. Now, what I want to do, because I mentioned this earlier, we have this quote from NASA that says 1 gram of algae has the same nutrition as 1,000 grams of fruits and vegetables. So I don't want people to have sticker shock, because a bag of our tablets, there's 1,000 tablets in a bag. It's normally $125, but with your discount code, it brings it down to 100. Now, I just want to put that in context. So using that quote from NASA, I took the weight of our bag. 1 bag has the same nutrition as 551 pounds of vegetables. Now, $3 a pound, that would have been about $1,500. Plus, it's 551 pounds of vegetables you didn't have to carry home. You didn't have to clean, cook, eat, or fight with your kids to eat. And there is no spoilage. We do put expiry date on the bags, because we have to for FDA reasons, and it's usually 2 or 3 years. But algae is the most interesting crop. It never goes bad once it's dry, and so you can have it for years. It won't maybe taste as fresh, but the nutrients will still be there, unlike your vegetables. So there's no spoilage. And again, I just want to mention that 1 tablet has the same nutrition as an entire plate of vegetables. So this is why I call it efficient nutrition. And that's just on the nourishing side. We didn't even get into the sort of longevity, biohacking, preserve your health benefits. And there's a couple of remarkable ones. Again, one called superoxide dismutase that is, spirulina has the highest concentration of it. And it's one of the few antioxidants that can penetrate the inner membrane of the mitochondria to protect it from damage being made to the DNA there from the ATP production. And as you will age, your body's production of superoxide dismutase, which is called SOD, drops precipitously until almost 0 when you're about 60 or 70. So your DNA is constantly getting damaged. Your mitochondria DNA is constantly getting damaged. So it causes cellular miscommunications. It causes all kinds of health issues. They're realizing Alzheimer's is predominantly a mitochondria disease. Same with heart. And just, if you don't think mitochondria are important, consider that the highest concentration of them are where the highest energy is needed. Your brain has 2 million mitochondria per cell in your brain. Your muscles have 5,000 mitochondria per cell, and that includes your heart, because it's a muscle. So keeping your mitochondria healthy is critical, because the first areas that get diseased are where the highest concentration of mitochondria are. And so it's no surprise that Alzheimer's and heart disease are so high. Interestingly, your skin only has 100 mitochondria per cell. I'm giving a talk in a couple of weeks at the Biohacking Congress. There's a lot of this research that I've been doing, because I'm the chief scientific officer, has been around for a long time, but it hasn't really started to make its way out to the consumer yet. So I'm trying to help people understand it. And I'll give you one more little nugget that will blow your mind. As you know, I mentioned at the very beginning that algae was the first life on Earth, and it was spirulina, which is a cyanobacteria. And after about 1 billion or so years, some other, that was called a prokaryote, is the sort of cell biology term, these tiny little bacteria that generated ATP, by the way. And then about 1 billion years later, these larger cells called eukaryotes started forming, and they swallowed up the little bacteria, which were cyanobacteria, i.e. spirulina. So the big bacteria swallowed up the little bacteria, and instead of digesting them, just let them stay. It's sort of like having a friend come over and say, can I stay with you for a little while? And then the friend just never leaves. But then that friend starts doing your dishes, your laundry, your grocery shopping. Well, that's what happened with the cells. The big cells swallowed up the little cells who stayed there. So the little bacteria, which were cyanobacteria, aka spirulina, stayed in the big cells forever and became mitochondria. And it's all proven in cell biology. So when you take spirulina, you are effectively giving your mitochondria itself.
That's cool.
Isn't that flippy?
I mean, it's amazing.
It's called the science is called endosymbiosis, because the larger cell used the little cell, the cyanobacteria, to generate ATP, and the little cell decided to stay, I guess, because it got protection from the bigger cell. But this has never been discussed anywhere ever by anybody. And the reason, and that's why this superoxide dismutase, spirulina, has the highest of it in the world. And not only does your body create less of it as you get older, it's virtually non-existent in other foods. And even if it does exist in other foods or supplements, it can't make its way through the digestive tract. So it never gets to your mitochondria. But because spirulina is a bacteria, it gets absorbed instantly and literally bypasses digestion. So its SOD does make its way to the mitochondria. But I used to, for years, I mean, I'm doing this for 12 years now, researching spirulina, and people would tell us, well, they try ours, but it was expensive. So they go try somebody else's, which was cheaper, and it was never as good. So they'd come back to us. And I kept thinking, like, I've done all the research of all the nutrients, and we, grow it carefully and dry it carefully. And I kept thinking, there's something I'm missing. And I finally figured it out. Because we don't use high heat to dry our algae, and everybody else does, our enzymes are all intact. Well, guess what? Superoxide dismutase is an enzyme. So you can take all the spirulina you want from somebody else, and that superoxide dismutase will never make its way to its mitochondria. And when your mitochondria are protected, guess what? It generates more ATP, which gives you more energy. See how it all makes sense?
Yeah, that's cool.
When you've hit the truth, it looks the same from every angle. It's just, and I think I should have probably become a scientist, because I am just so flipped out. I feel like I won the lottery when I discovered this. I'm beside myself. I can hardly wait to tell people.
Catharine, where can people hear you speak as we're wrapping things up on this topic?
Well, I'm at the Biohacking Congress in Las Vegas on March 19th. My talk is on Saturday morning, March 20th. Then I'm speaking at the Cryocon Congress in Dallas, and my talk is on March 23rd. Then I'm also speaking at the KetoCon in Austin. I don't have my date, but that's July 8th to 10th. I'm probably speaking at the Cosmoprof, which is a beauty show, July 12th in Vegas. And I'm speaking at Dave Asprey's Biohacking Congress in September in Beverly Hills. That'll be fun. And then back to the Biohacking Congress in Miami on October 22nd. So, and there'll probably be more as, you know, word gets out about this, because it's pretty wild.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really
Yes.
loved hearing about all this. I'm
Well,
sure a
thank you
lot
for
of our
letting me.
listeners will love it too. And thanks for giving us that code
Yes.
to be able to get the
Yes.
discount. So
Health
the code is
Babes.
Health Babes.
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
and we will give I'll probably give a webinar sometime in April or May on this mitochondria health issue, because it is the key to your health and longevity. There's no question. So that's where all the science is going these days anyway. So glad to make a contribution.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening. And we hope everyone has a great day.